Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get restarted with this next topic for all of you guys here at the temple and anybody who's joining us online. I'm going to be talking about dissolving the ego. Ego serves no purpose. And just like before, I'm actually going to pause and stop for questions, but I'm actually going to stop 2 or 3 times during this talk to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions to be sure you understand what it is that I taught before we move on to the next thing. Firstly, what I'm going to share with you guys is I'm going to share with you guys what is the ego so that you understand what it is before we actually start talking about eliminating it. So what your ego is it's a collection of experiences from the past and your future expectations of yourself. The ego is accumulation of thoughts, ideas, and perceptions that we have of our self-image and our self-identity. The ego will contain arrogance, pride, judgment, in measuring and comparing as being superior or inferior to others. This is where the mind's putting yourself above or below others. You're judging other people. You might be walking down the street looking at someone else's clothes or their physical appearance or the way that they talk or maybe the certain material possessions that they have. You might be measuring and comparing yourself to other people. This is from the ego. It's the arrogance, the pride, the boastfulness. I'm right. Everybody else is wrong, right? That's what the ego is going to do to you. And as you do this, it's going to cause you complications in your day-to-day life. During the lifetime of the Buddha, this word ego didn't actually exist. It didn't come into existence until not too long ago. So when the Buddha talked, he didn't teach about an ego, so to speak, but he did teach 2 things that we are referring to as the ego, because this is a new word, and we're basically combining 2 things that the Buddha was talking about. So in effect, he was talking about the ego, but he just didn't describe it as one thing. He actually talks about it as 2 separate things. So I'm going to explain to you what those 2 separate things are that we're referring to as the ego, because it helps you to understand it as 2 separate things, because then you'll be able to see the symptoms are different and the solutions are different. So there's something called personal existence view. What this is where the mind is clinging to your self-image or your self-identity, thinking that this is who you are as a person. So you're clinging to the body or to the mind, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So this personal existence view is a pollution of mind. So if you ever spilled something on your clothing and you were embarrassed in that situation, this is your personal existence view. The mind wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you're being perceived that way, you're happy. But when you're not being perceived the way you want to be perceived, you might be frustrated or agitated or embarrassed, right? Or if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a pimple or a mole or a wrinkle or a gray hair, or you started losing your hair and you were shaken up by that, that's your personal existence view. Your mind is clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are as a person, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. If you've ever stood in front of your closet and you thought, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to appear? What clothing do I want to select based on the people that I'm going to see today? This is your personal existence view. The mind's clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And as long as your mind's doing this, you can't be happy in all situations, because it's only a matter of time before this body isn't being perceived by others in the way that you want to be perceived. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to get to this peace and this joy, which is permanent. So as long as you're clinging to this self-image, you won't be able to get to permanent peace, because this self-image is impermanent, but your mind's going to crave for it to be permanent. You might crave permanent youthfulness or permanent complexion, or you might crave for your hair to look a certain way permanently. So you can't get to permanent peace as long as you're clinging to this body. And then another thing is the mind might cling to a self-identity as who you think you are as a person. Maybe your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. You might cling to this as who you think you are. Like, I am American, or I am Chinese, or I am a Brit, right? Or I am an Aussie, or any of this I am around your culture, your ethnicity, sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. Like, I am a police officer. or I am a Buddhist teacher, or I am a husband, or I am a wife, or I'm a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend. This identity that your mind's clinging to, this isn't who you are, but your mind will adopt this as who you think you are. So now let's just say you adopt the identity that I am American, or I am Chinese, or I am a Brit, or any of this I am. Well, now when you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, they're talking very fondly about your nationality. You'll be happy, you'll be excited because they're talking about me in a fond way. But now 2 tables over, they're saying something degrading and disparaging about your nationality. They say all Chinese people are this, or all British people are that, or all American people are that. Well, now you're going to feel angry or frustrated because that identity that you're clinging to, it's getting triggered, and now you think they're talking about you. Or let's just say you had a job like a police officer, and while you're doing this job, you absolutely love it. You think it's great. It's so wonderful, right? But then when you get injured and you can't do that job anymore, or you retire, or you get fired, you might be angry or frustrated because you're clinging to this identity. You might feel lost and confused in the world where you don't even know who you are anymore. So this personal existence view that you're clinging to, the mind holding on to it, it will ultimately cause discontentedness in the mind, and it will cause difficulties and struggles in your day-to-day life. Since we're going to be talking about animal to human later today, I'll share with you that this personal existence view is something that you need as an animal. Without this, you wouldn't be able to survive. If you didn't know that I am a deer and that is a lion, and I need to run from this lion or else it's going to kill this being, you wouldn't be able to stay alive. But in the human realm, we actually don't need this personal existence view, right? So this personal existence view is part of the ego, because the mind's clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now you go out into the world trying to get people to perceive you in that way. Well, then there's something called conceit. Conceit is like the arrogance, the pride, the judging, the measuring and comparing, putting yourself above people or putting yourself below people. This conceit is also from our animal existences. When we were in the animal realm, we needed conceit. We wouldn't have survived without it, because when we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and who's the alpha female, because they're teaching us how to hunt and they're reproducing. They're having more and more babies, and we needed to learn from them how to survive and how to be good wolves. Or when we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of this herd, because she's going to show us where the food is. She's going to show us where the migration paths are. She's going to show us where the watering holes are. And we needed to follow this woman to show us where it is that we're going to be able to get these things, right? If we didn't know who was above us in our elephant herd, we would have died, because we would have been roaming and wandering in the jungle, not knowing where to find food or water or the migration paths or anything like this. So we needed a pecking order in the animal world. But in the human world, we don't need that. Everybody's the same. Everybody's equal. Now, other people might have a pecking order in their mind, right? They might think the president or prime minister of a country is here, and, a taxi driver or a food server is here, or somebody who sweeps the streets is down here. That's what other people's minds are doing. But what you would ultimately like to get to is where your mind's not doing that. Because if you put yourself above people, when you go into a certain environment, like a social situation, like a party, you'll try to figure out who's above me and who's below me. If you've been to parties like this, someone might walk in and be like, "Hi, how are you?" "Oh, hi, what's your name?" "My name's David." "What do you do?" Right away, people want to know, what do you do? "Oh, well, I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor." "Oh, okay. This person's above me, perhaps." That might be the way they think, right? And now this is very difficult in a mixed environment, because maybe this person is talking down to people in one way and up to people in another way. So if you look down on people, in some situations, you're going to look up to people and you're going to be uncalm. Maybe you go into your boss's office and you feel shaken up by this because you think your boss is above you. So as long as you have conceit, you're going to be putting people above you and below you, and you're going to have difficulties being peaceful and joyful in all situations. Your mind's going to be unsettled and shaken up and uncalm. So you would like to get to the point where you view everybody as equal. So here in Thailand, we have a king. right? There's a king of Thailand. But here in Thailand, we also have people that sweep the streets. Well, if you can get rid of your conceit, you can get to the point where you treat the king of Thailand exactly the same way as you treat the person who sweeps the streets. So when I go outside and I see the person sweeping the streets, I say, hello, sir, how are you? Good morning. Right? And when I see the king of Thailand, I say, oh, I haven't seen him. I have never met him. But if I did, I'd say, hello, sir. How are you? Good morning. Right? So you can treat everybody the same. That's why your mind can be peaceful and joyful and at ease. Whereas if you're trying to figure out, how do I treat this person? Are they above me or below me? This is a lot of energy. This is a lot of effort. You can get exhausted in those kinds of situations where you go into a social situation. You can be exhausted trying to figure out who's above you and below you. But if you can get to the point where you just treat everybody the same, you can be at ease. You can be completely comfortable. So this is a big portion of the ego. When we talk about ego in the modern times, we're tending to talk about this conceit, but you need to be able to see this other part too of personal existence view, which is also referred to as the ego. Okay, so I'm going to now pause and see if you guys have questions on what is the ego before I move on, because I'm going to share with you how this ego is causing you problems, which I've already talked a little bit about, but now I'm going to talk about it in more detail. So do you guys have any questions on what is the ego? Yes, ma'am. You have a couple questions coming in. Those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Yes, thank you, Teacher David. How can I overcome seeing on the streets, seeing people that are asking for something as less? Mm-hmm. It's like I try to see everybody the same, but those that are asking for something.
Yeah. So the first thing is cultivating the wisdom of what the ego is, so you know that that's what's going on. Is the ego's trying to put yourself above or below this person? That's the first thing, is cultivating the wisdom. Then when you're noticing it with your mindfulness coming up, you need to cut it off and let it go and train the mind, restrain the mind. Be like, no, don't think about that person that way. We are all equal. You sometimes need to talk to yourself a little bit within your own mind. So that's part of it. The other part of it is the Buddha taught that whenever you see anybody experiencing anything that is unfortunate, like if they're experiencing misfortune, he's saying that you've experienced that exact same thing in this life or in some previous life. So when you see that person on the street who's maybe homeless and doesn't have food, you need to remind yourself, I experienced that exact same thing, either in this life or some previous life. And that'll help you to be able to see yourself more as an equal. It'll also help you to arise loving kindness and compassion, because you realize like, I'm at a point in my life where I don't have to ask people for food, but this person is. That's where they are in their life. And I don't have to look down on them for that, because you used to do exactly the same thing at one point in the past. And this will help you to just be more loving and more kind and more understanding in these situations. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
I just found it's very difficult to apply this principle into because, like, for example, for most of the business or corporations here, they have different levels of memberships. And it's depending on how much the customer have spent in the company, right? Mm-hmm. And also in a lot of companies, they have a business strategy that you should spend 80% of your, you should spend most of your time and effort, energy to the 20% of your clients who actually contribute to 80% of your business. Mm-hmm. And I just want to know, how do you see this? Like, is it in the business world, it's not possible, difficult to apply this principle?
Yeah, it's possible to do this in business. You just aren't seeing how to do that right now. You don't have the wisdom of how to do that. So that's why it's good you're asking the question. So the first thing, once again, is to understand the wisdom that, yeah, we can treat everybody equally. But treating everybody equally doesn't mean you're going to spend the same amount of time with all people, right? So if you have customers that are spending a significant amount of income to support the product and services of a business, well, it would only make sense that that business needs to spend more time with these particular people because they're contributing to the profit. So What you would like to do, though, is you'd like to view these people as equal. That even though you're spending more time with the people who are spending more money, that doesn't mean you see them as different. So that if this person who's spending less money is asking for help or needing something from you, you're willing to spend time with them. But it's just that you're prioritizing your ability to work with people who are contributing the most to the company. So that's not viewing them as a person as being higher or lower. It's just that as a customer and what they're contributing to the company, I need to be able to spend more time with this particular person because they're spending more money to be able to support what we're doing as a company. So they're essentially renting more of our time than this person over here. But mentally, you would like to see them all as equal. So even though other people might see people as different levels, it's important for you to not do that. So even if you're in an environment where someone else thinks that they are better than you or they are higher than you, or if you're in a company that has a hierarchical structure, it's important for you to not adopt that type of thinking, even though other people might have that thinking in their mind. So more and more, you'll be able to eliminate that. And what I'm going to teach you here in a moment is I'm going to teach you certain practices that will target this personal existence view and this conceit to be able to eliminate it from the mind. So right now, I'm just explaining what it is. I haven't explained to you how to actually eliminate it yet. That's what I'm going to do next.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so I don't see any other questions anywhere. Okay, so now that you guys are understanding this ego, this is the arrogance, the pride. That's the conceit part of it, right? The arrogance, the pride, the measuring and comparing, the seeing yourself as superior, inferior to other people. People can even do this in like a spiritual community like this, like I'm more holy than you. I meditate longer than you. I go to more retreats than you go to. I'm more holy than you. People can kind of put themselves above you, but right away you can see that that person isn't practicing to eliminate the ego, right? This person is putting themselves above you. But then also in a spiritual community, somebody can put themselves below you too. They can think, oh, I don't really practice the teachings very closely. I'm not going to ask a question of the teacher, right? Or I'm not going to have a conversation with the teacher because I feel like I'm not practicing the teachings close enough yet. They kind of put themselves below other people. So this can happen even in a community like this. So you would like to eliminate this conceit where you're thinking of yourself above or below people, measuring and comparing. Like, I'm a vegan, that person still eats meat, so I'm holier than that person. No, you're not. Everybody is equal. This is just the mind's ego that's doing that. And then that personal existence view that we talked about, where the mind's clinging to this self-image and self-identity. So while the Buddha split these out, and it's helpful to split them out, now when you hear me use the word ego, I'm going to be referring to both of these things because I'm about to just talk about the ego in general. And when you hear me talking about ego in general, I'm talking about both of these things together. But then we're going to split them back out, and I'm going to show you how to get rid of both of these. Okay? So here's some of the challenges that your ego is going to create for you in your day-to-day life. What your ego is going to do is it's going to project unwholesome qualities that you have onto other people, and it's going to read those unwholesome qualities as coming from the other person, when in reality they're coming from your own mind. Okay, so let me give you an example of this. Say you're in a business meeting and you're just sitting in there with a few coworkers, and now kind of like partially through the business meeting, somebody walks in. It's wearing some really nice clothing. Every little hair is in exactly the right spot. They have this wonderful smelling cologne and perfume on, and they have the best skin complexion you've ever seen. And they walk in and they just come in and they sit down at the table. Your mind might think, because of its ego, look at her, look at him, trying to look so handsome. Look at her trying to look so beautiful. Doesn't she think she's so hot? Or doesn't he think he's so handsome? That's not what that person's doing. All that person did is walked into the room. But your ego, where you want to look like the most handsome, you want to be the most beautiful, it just projected that onto that other person because you want to be perceived that way by other people. And now you've cast that onto them, you projected it onto them, and now you're reading that as coming from them, when in reality it's coming from your own mind. Because all that's actually happened is a person just walked into the room. Sure, they happen to have a nice suit on. Sure, their hair happens to be pretty well groomed. Sure, they happen to have a nice complexion, but they're not walking in trying to profess that they're the most beautiful or the most handsome, that's coming from your mind. That's your perception. That's your ego wanting other people to perceive you that way. And now you've projected that onto them and you're reading it as coming from them. And now in that business meeting, when that person speaks up, maybe you're bitter and harsh and hostile with them, degrading to them and talking down to them. And now your coworkers see that unskillfulness and it reflects poorly on you and your professionalism. So you need to be very aware and attentive to your mind that it's going to try to project certain qualities within your own mind onto this other person and read that as coming from them when in reality it's coming from your own mind. It's important to understand what judgment is versus discernment. What judgment is where you're attempting to determine what is wholesome or unwholesome for other people. That's where you're judging people. You're judging someone and trying to decide what is wholesome or unwholesome for them. That's where you're judging someone else, trying to determine if that person is one way or another. What you would like to get to is where you're practicing discernment, where you're making wise decisions about navigating the world, that you're not looking down on people and you're not looking up to people, that you just view everybody as equal. Because this judgment is going to hinder you. Because in situations where you're judging other people, it's causing harm to your own mind. Because you're judging others, it's hindering you from being able to see true reality. It's hindering you from being able to practice this loving kindness and compassion towards other beings. So your perceptions, the mind is clinging to a perception in this situation that I just described with the person walking in the business meeting. There's a certain perception that the mind has, which is a belief or opinion that may or may not even be true. And if you cling to that perception, it hinders you from probably meeting one of the nicest people that you've ever met. Because now your perception is that this person's trying to look so handsome or this person's trying to look so beautiful, when in reality it's your own mind. And now you might be bitter and harsh and hostile to that person, thinking that you're above them or below them. You might be putting yourself below them as well. Wow, look at them. They're so beautiful. Look at their hair. My hair will never look like that. Oh, I'm such a low person. You're not interested in doing that because now it's going to hinder you from having harmonious relationships. So your perceptions are your beliefs and opinions of how things seem to be, which may or may not be true. And this can be developed in situations where you meet other people. You could be clinging to a perception. One time I had somebody come here at the temple many years ago, and they sat right here on the floor, and they sent me an email afterwards, and they said, "David, you're the most arrogant teacher I've ever met. You're so conceited." I was like, "Really? Why is that?" They were like, "You're sitting in a chair, and I was sitting on the floor, and that means you were putting yourself above me." And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that you thought that way," or whatever I said to them. The reason why I use a chair is because I was in a motorbike accident about several years ago in 2019, and I had difficulty sitting on cross-leg. For 15 years, I sat on the floor and I taught on the floor. And that's one of the things that this student said, or they weren't really a student, they just come here for one time. And I used to sit on the floor. For 15 years, I used to teach on the floor. But then once I got in a motorbike accident, I couldn't do that anymore because I need to stretch my legs sometimes. So this person was casting their unwholesome qualities on me and thinking just because I'm sitting in a chair that somehow I have conceit, not even factoring into the equation that, hey, maybe this person has a medical issue with their legs and they can't sit on the floor any longer. So this is the mind's judgment. I need to judge this person, right? I need to look at this person, what they're doing, and decide whether they're wholesome or they're unwholesome, right? Or I'm above them or I'm below them. So your mind's going to be constantly doing this, even in an environment like this, where you're coming to learn about the ego and eliminate the ego. Your mind can be judging other people, right? So this individual who came here just one time, they started judging me. And of course, they weren't able to learn beyond that because in their mind, they were judging me. And this is where you harm yourself, because in a situation where this person could have otherwise learned some teachings that would be really helpful for them to eliminate their ego, they chose to go away and no longer learn. And that's their choice. But you can see how this ego is harming you, because in a situation where you could potentially learn and grow and develop, you would actually be hindered from doing that if you went in there just kind of judging people, right? So the mind's ego is like self-sabotaging. The mind thinks that I'm so great and everybody else is not. And now the ego that thinks it's so great and so wonderful and it's so arrogant and prideful will never actually get the help that it needs because it thinks that I'm so right and everybody else is so wrong. So the ego is actually the most self-sabotaging thing you will ever find because it goes around thinking that I'm so great and everybody else is so wrong, and it never actually gets the help that it needs to be eliminated and dissolved because it's constantly projecting its unwholesome qualities onto others, reading that as coming from the other person when it's coming from your own mind. But the ego will hinder itself from ever getting the help that it needs because it thinks I'm right and everyone else is wrong. So you can see how this is a cyclical effect, that it continues to struggle because the ego constantly thinks that I'm right and everybody else is wrong, or I'm so wonderful and I'm so wholesome and everyone else is not. So not only will the mind project these unwholesome qualities onto others and read that as coming from others when it's coming from your own mind, but the mind will project its wholesome qualities, craving everyone to do the same things. So let's just say somebody is like a plant-based eater and they eat vegan, right? They eat all vegan food. They might think, everybody should be vegan. I'm vegan. Everybody should be vegan. And if you're not vegan, you're not wholesome. Right? And somebody can think in derogatory ways towards someone who's still eating meat and still choosing to eat meat, right? So these wholesome qualities that you develop, whether it's about eating plants or concentration or focus or clarity, or you're using right speech, or maybe you're meditating for periods of time, or maybe you're going away to retreats. If you take these wholesome things that you're doing and you think that everybody should be doing this and I'm so great because I'm doing these things and other people aren't, this is your ego that's in there projecting those qualities, wanting everybody else to do them in the same way as you. And you need to be able to see that this hinders you from having close relationships with people, because people aren't interested in being around ego. They're not interested in being around egotistical individuals. They'll tend to push you away, or they'll tend to just kind of walk away, and your relationships will be over. So what you might be getting to as me talking about some of these, and there's other things that the ego's doing too, but these are just some of the main ones, what you might be starting to come to the conclusion of is that the ego serves no purpose. It's not helping you in life by putting yourself above people and putting yourself below people, by judging other people as being wholesome or unwholesome, in these kinds of things, projecting your unwholesome qualities onto others and reading that as coming from them when it's coming from your own mind. It's not actually helping you. It serves no purpose. You can actually dissolve this ego and eliminate it, and you'll find that you'll reside more peaceful and more joyful, and you'll have more harmonious relationships. So again, I'm going to pause here, because after this, I'm going to now teach you how to eliminate your ego by eliminating personal existence view and eliminating the conceit. So do you guys have any questions on the challenges and difficulties that the ego is causing?
When you live in a society that has a lot of ego, thinking that white Christians are above other people, is it better to navigate it and just relate to people that do not think that way, or is it better to leave that country and move away?
Yeah, usually it's best. I can't tell you whether it's wise to leave a country or stay in a country, because that's going to be a case-by-case basis based on your own unique variables. You need to decide that. But on an individual basis, when you're around someone who has high amount of ego, it's usually best to just go away from that relationship, because the person's ego is so high, they're looking down on you and thinking that you're below them, and you'll never be able to have a harmonious relationship. In fact, one of the things that the Buddha teaches that every harmonious relationship needs is equality. He talks about 4 different things that every harmonious relationship needs. He talks about that you need to practice giving or generosity in your relationships. You need to practice virtuous behavior or moral conduct, that you need to have endearing speech, like right speech, and you need to think in terms of equality, that we're all equal. If you don't have those 4 basic things in a relationship, then it's not going to typically go very well. So giving or generosity, endearing speech, good, wholesome, virtuous, moral conduct in terms of your speech or actions, and then equality. So if someone doesn't view you as being equal to them, they see themselves as above you, the relationship's not going to ever go well. So it's best to usually move away from those relationships. And that person slowly starts to learn that people aren't interested in being around them, and they feel quite isolated. And slowly but surely, they start to uncover why. Because they can see, like, whoa, what's going on in my life? Why aren't people interested in spending time with me? Why do people tend to go away from me? And they can start seeing this more and more clearly for themselves. So that's one of the most loving and kind things you can do, is choose to kind of walk away from that. And then this person maybe slowly but surely decides to learn on their own. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you guys how to eliminate personal existence view and conceit. But first, we're going to start with personal existence view. Remember, this is where the mind's clinging to the self-image or the self-identity, thinking that this is who you are. And you need to get to a point where you realize non-self, where you've stripped away personal existence view, and you realize that this body isn't you. It doesn't determine who you are as a person. And whatever identity that you've been clinging to in your mind, that doesn't define who you are either. Because I'll give you another example of this that I haven't used yet in this course, is that, sometimes when we use drugs and alcohol at some time in our life, we're taught that I am an alcoholic or I am an addict, right? This is something that sometimes we're taught. And sometimes people teach you that because they're trying to help you to see to never go back to drugs and alcohol ever again, which is wise, to never go back to drugs and alcohol. But what the mind's doing in that situation is it's clinging to certain decisions that you've made in the past, and you're defining who you are today based on decisions that you've made in the past. And the decisions that you made in the past doesn't determine who you are today. That's not what that is, right? But that's what the mind's going to want to do. Based on decisions that you've made, you're going to make a certain decision about your identity of who you are today. Like, I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. No, you're not a drug addict. You're not an alcoholic. You chose to use drugs and alcohol in the past. Those were choices that you made, but that doesn't define who you are today, right? So this is what you would ultimately like to get to, where you understand that this body was born on a certain land, but you don't have to adopt the identity of I am American or I am Canadian or I am a Brit or any of this other I am. You don't have to adopt that in your mind, right? So you can come to the understanding that this body was born in a certain place, but you don't have to adopt that identity. And these things here are going to help you strip this away. One is you would like to learn this meditation to realize non-self. This is a meditation that the Buddha taught during his lifetime, and I'm going to be teaching it as part of this course. I think tomorrow or maybe on Friday, at some point, I'm going to be teaching that so you can learn this meditation to help you strip away this idea of who you think you are as a person. You would like to be able to change your language and start to disassociate with this I or this me, because the way that English works is we will say, I am hungry or I am thirsty, right? We're having this I in there. It's reinforcing this personal existence view. What's true reality is that this body needs food. That's true reality, is this body needs food. I am not hungry because there's no I here. That's the mind's delusion. That's the mind's misunderstanding, that it thinks that there's an I here, when in reality there isn't an I. That's just the confusion that the mind has. So you can disassociate with this word I or me or my by changing the way that your internal dialogue works and the way that you interact in the world, right? So you might say, the body needs food. Or instead of saying, hand me my phone, you might say, can you hand me the phone? Right? So this will slowly help you strip away this personal existence view. Because in the Thai language, which the Thai language has been created through Buddhism, because Buddhism came to Thailand about 800 to 1200 years ago, but the Thai language that we speak today was only invented a few hundred years ago, right? And that language that we speak in Thai was informed by Buddhism. In the Thai language, when we talk, we don't use the pronoun I. We usually talk in the third person. So like when my son comes home from school, I don't say, how was your day at school? I say, how was Bailan's day at school? We speak in the third person. Or I would say, is Bailan hungry? Would Bailan like to go to the restaurant? Right? So you speak in the third person. Or you might say, David would like to go to the restaurant, or David is hungry, right? So the Thai language is well fitted for this kind of thing. But the English language and probably some of the other languages you speak, probably not so, because it hasn't been informed by Buddhism in the same way that the Thai language has been informed. So you can kind of disassociate with these words in most cases. 95% of the time, 98% of the time, you can speak in ways of like, hey, would you guys like to go to the movies? Let's go to the movies. I didn't have to use the word I want to go to the movies. Hey, let's go to the movies, right? I can take out that word I. So in most cases, you can do this and sound just fine. But there's going to be some rare occasions where you still need to use this word I. And in those situations, you just need to train your mind that you might be saying this word, but you don't have to associate with it. So I might say, this is my son Bailan. If I introduce you to him, I might say, this is my son Bailan. Because if I said, this is the being that I contributed sperm to create 12 years ago, you guys would be like, huh? What is this guy talking about? I don't know if I'm interested in this Buddhism stuff. Do I have to talk that way? Right? So you might need to just still use this word I sometimes, but your mind can understand he's not my son. He doesn't belong to me. He's a being that is his own individual, unique being. I'm here as his parent just to guide him and help him along in the world and teaching him wisdom. So in certain situations, you might still need to use that. You're going to need to develop what's called the perception of impermanence, where you understand the world around you is constantly changing. Because what personal existence view is doing is your mind's clinging to this body or this mind, wanting it to be permanent, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way permanently. So if you can see that everything around you is impermanent, then you realize how unwise it is to cling to this body, wanting it to be permanent. So you might need to go around the world and see that crack in the sidewalk and be like, that's impermanence. You see the fading of the paint on the fence. It's like, that's impermanence. We had a certain number of people in the class when we first started. Some of those people have left and some more people have come. And now this is impermanence, right? This is just change. That's all that's happened, right? That's why people can come and go. You can feel completely comfortable doing so. So you need to be able to see the impermanent nature of the world so you realize how unwise it is to cling to this body or anything in the mind as who you are, because all that stuff's going to change. If you cling to your job or your friends or your activities or your hobbies and you think that that is who you are as a person, when all that stuff changes, you will really struggle in the world. This is where people sometimes come to Thailand. They say, I don't even know who I am anymore. I need to go find myself. I need to go find my true self. I'm going to go to Thailand, Mom and Dad, and I'm going to go find myself. Okay, you're not going to find yourself here in Thailand because it doesn't exist. They might find new hobbies, new activities, new friends, new job or something like this, but you're never going to find yourself here because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist here. It doesn't exist anywhere. So if you cling to a job or occupation as that's who you think you are, as soon as you're not doing that job anymore, you'll feel lost and confused in the world. Or if you cling to the idea that I am a boyfriend and I am a girlfriend, when you guys break up and you're single, you'll feel lost and confused in the world because you don't understand how to relate to the world without that identity intact. So you need to understand that you provide these roles or you perform in these roles, but that doesn't identify with who you are as a person. So I perform the role of a Buddhist teacher, but my mind doesn't identify with I am a Buddhist teacher. So now when someone says all Buddhist teachers are lovely and kind and warm and gentle, okay, that's their perspective, that's their opinion, but they're not talking about me. But then when somebody says all Buddhist teachers are horrible, they're leading people to hell, blah, 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 blah. Okay, they're not talking about me. I can maintain peace and joy, right? Because this role that I'm performing is not permanent. At some point, it's going to come to an end. When I die, I will no longer be doing this any longer, right? So if my mind was clinging to this as who I am as a person, when you get close to death, it'll be very painful because your mind won't want to let go. So you need to be able to understand you're going to perform certain roles in the world, but that doesn't define who you are as a person. Okay, and by seeing this impermanence will help you to do that. One of the things you can do is you can wear simple clothing and make your appearance very simple. This is one of the reasons why the Buddha shaved his hair, and he also wore simple robes, rag robes, because he was practicing and he had already realized non-self, and that's one of the ways that you eliminate this personal existence view. You don't have to shave your hair and wear rag robes in order to be able to eliminate personal existence view. There's ways for you to do this in the household life. You can stack your clothes up and just pick off the top of your stack, because what your mind's going to do is you're going to stand there in front of your closet and you're going to think, who am I going to see today and how do I want to look? And now you're going to grab the set of clothes that help this body to appear the way that you want to appear in the world. So what you would like to do is get that mind out of the way and don't allow your mind to make that selection. So if you just stack your clothes up and you pick off the top of your stack, now your mind's not getting an opportunity to decide what it's going to wear on any particular day, so that you can go out into the world and not having this personal existence view. So if you do this for an extended period of time, multiple months and years, slowly but surely you will erode away your personal existence view. But be careful, because your mind's going to probably want to grab from the middle of the stack. Because I know that, because I did that myself, that when I switched to these white clothes, there were some shirts that fit me a little bit better than others. And there were days where I tried to grab from the middle of the stack, and I had to observe that about my mind and cut that off and let it go and not allow the mind to do that. So if you're going to have these stacks of clothes, maybe you have a formal stack for the formal clothes you wear to work. Maybe you have a casual stack for the casual clothes. You would like to just peel off the top. And if you see your mind's trying to grab from the middle, don't allow it to do that. Just pick off the top, because that's your personal existence view kicking in, trying to grab from the middle. So you can get rid of your jewelry, your makeup, your scents. You can remove your facial hair and your head hair. You can wear simple clothing. This will knock down the mind's wanting to project itself into the world and be perceived by others in a certain way. For women, they typically have a hard time shaving their hair. For men, they oftentimes have challenges with facial hair. If the thought of this even bothers you and you feel uncomfortable even with the thought of shaving your hair, this is all the more reason to actually do it, because your mind's uncomfortable in that situation. So you need to put your mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in, so that it can actually be trained to let this go. And you might decide to do this in stages. Sometimes when women shave their hair, they will do kind of like 4 inches at a time, and they'll wear that for a few months, maybe another 4 inches, another 4 inches, and they'll just kind of slowly cut it back. Or men will kind of go down to a goatee, then they'll get rid of that and just go to like a mustache, and then they'll kind of get rid of the mustache over a period of weeks and months. So this is an option for you. Again, it's up to you whether you choose to do this or not. But this is where you're going to see a lot of progress with personal existence view, is by getting rid of the clothing, picking the clothing, getting rid of the mind's ability to do that, the hair, the makeup, the scents, the facial hair, and all these kinds of things. And eventually, if you do that for 2, 3, 4, 5 years or so, who knows, up to you, you can actually maybe choose to start doing those things again, but your mind's not attached to it. So if you shaved your hair for like 2 or 3 or 4 years, you got completely comfortable going out into the world like that, and you shaved your facial hair perhaps, then eventually you might just choose to grow it back because you just prefer to have it, but you're completely comfortable going into the world with this hair or without the hair, because your mind has overcome that aspect of your personal existence view. You might even see that you have family members who are attached to your hair, right? Like moms and dads and brothers and sisters and life partners might start being uncomfortable. That's because of their craving and they're wanting that permanence of your hair to look a certain way. So you'll actually be helping them in those situations too. Whenever you notice that this self-image or self-identity is coming up in the mind, you need to cut it off and let it go. That's where the Eightfold Path comes in, that you need to have mindfulness or awareness of mind to be able to see your mind's wanting to be projected in the world in a certain way. And when you see the mind doing that, whether you're putting on clothes in the morning, whether you're going outside, whether you're fixing your hair, whatever it is, cut that off and let it go. You know, in these bathrooms here at the temple, we just remodeled this temple, a classroom. We put mirrors in the bathroom, and me and my son were contemplating putting a sign on the mirror that said, "There is no you." You know, what are you looking at? There is no you, you know, but we didn't do it. But I thought it would be pretty comical if we did something like that. Like, you look just fine. There is no you, right? So if you're constantly looking in the mirror, that's your personal existence view. So you're going to need to cut that off and let it go. And then over time, you can seek guidance with the teacher over multiple sessions, because you're going to have certain things that come up during your life, and you may or may not even realize that personal existence view is involved. One of the examples that I give is one time I had a student contact me, and he said he was having all kinds of trouble since COVID. And I was like, really? What's going on? He's like, well, there's these places that I normally go and I just order for 30 seconds, like a cup of coffee. And I usually give them some money and they give me my coffee and I'm out the door. No big deal. But these places that I go to nowadays, they have contactless payment, and they turn their computer screen around and I have to swipe or I have to touch or tap. And it says tip 18%, 20%, 25%. And he's like, I'm having such a hard time going to these places because I don't tip them, and I am a good tipper. And when I go in there, I don't tip them, and I feel so conflicted. I don't understand why. I am a good tipper. And I was like, that's your personal existence view. Your mind is identifying with I am a good tipper. And when you're tipping, you feel completely fine and you feel comfortable. But when you're not tipping, your mind doesn't feel comfortable. So I advised him to start not tipping in other places too, where he would typically tip. And this will train his mind to let go of that personal existence view and identifying with I am a great tipper. Because in these situations where he wasn't tipping, he's feeling uncomfortable. So the solution here isn't to just tip everywhere he goes. That's not the solution, because the mind's craving that permanence. The solution is sometimes you tip, sometimes you don't tip. And now you get your mind comfortable with this impermanence, that it's not going to always be tipping, and that's okay. Right? So this is some of the things that can happen as you're going through your day-to-day life. You might notice some difficulties and struggles, and you need to reach out to a teacher and get help. So feel free to reach out and ask for help and guidance as you're going through your day-to-day life. So do you guys have any questions on eliminating personal existence view and how you might do that? Yes. For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
So, would you say it's a good idea to try to put ourselves in certain situations? So, for example, in our closet, let's say we have a bunch of clothes, and there's, I don't know, a couple of T-shirts that we really don't like. We don't like the color or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's better to not, rather than give them away, it's better to keep them and make a purpose of using them. Or if we're in I think it's easier here in Chiang Mai when it comes to personal existence view. For me, it seems a lot easier not to worry so much about that. But if, let's say, we're in a country or a city which is where we perceive that everybody dresses in a certain way, looks in a certain way, or if we go to a restaurant or something like that that's really fancy, is it good to put ourselves in situations like that and, go to the restaurant, obviously not wearing something completely ragged, but not placing so much emphasis on on how we look?
Yes, you're going to need to expose the mind to the things that it doesn't want to be exposed to. In modern psychology, they refer to this as exposure therapy, that you're exposing your mind to the things that it doesn't want to be exposed to. And now you train your mind in that situation to be comfortable and be content and be peaceful and joyful. So that favorite sweater that grandma gave you, and she thought it was the most beautiful sweater, and you're like, I'll never wear that sweater ever. Wearing that sweater would actually be really good for you, right? Because now you go out into the world without this personal existence view that you might feel uncomfortable when you go out, but over time you'll become more and more comfortable, and you realize it's just clothing. It's just clothing. So maybe 95% of the time you can do what I'm describing here. But if you were going to like immigration to get a new visa and you're like having an interview, if you showed up with some ripped jeans and, holy jeans and stuff like this, it's not a good idea, right? So those people in certain places might be judging you. Like if you're going to a job interview, you're not interested in showing up with ripped jeans. So 95% of the time, 98% of the time, you can do what I'm describing here. But every once in a while, if you're going into an environment where you need to look a certain way because those people are judging you, and they're going to make a decision about your life, then wear the nice clothes. But your mind can be just as peaceful and happy and joyful no matter what you're wearing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're going to talk about this conceit in the mind. This is the other part of the ego, right? That arrogance, that pride, that measuring and comparing, putting yourself above people or putting yourself below people, right? So you're going to need to eliminate judgment with no comparisons that you are superior or inferior to other people. Right? If you look at yourself as being superior or inferior to other people, you're going to need to eliminate that. So where you see your mind doing that and wanting to judge other people, you're going to need to cut that off and let it go. Training your mind to be humble and that you're just like everyone else. You are equal to everyone else. So you need to be observant of the mind. You're going to need to be kind and gentle because it's the right thing to do. Not because you want something from other people, but because you know it's wise to be kind and gentle. Because when you're arrogant, oftentimes there's bitterness and hostility. It's like, I'm better than you. How dare you talk to me like that, right? The mind becomes, aggressive and harsh and bitter and hostile. So you'd like to be kind and gentle and humble to the people around you. Don't feel like you deserve to be treated a certain way, right? This is kind of like the mind's conceit and the ego coming in. So just be gentle and polite, even if other people are not being that way. You can choose to be gentle and polite with the people around you. You can ask others for advice and what they have learned in life and just listen without trying to prove anything to them. When you're in a conversation with people and you have ego, when somebody starts sharing information about their life and kind of their accomplishments and what they've been doing in life, if you have ego, you're going to want to come over the top of them. You're going to want to be like, oh, really? You sold $100,000 worth of software the last quarter? Well, I sold $250,000, right? And you're going to want to come over the top of, oh, really? You have a master's degree? Well, I have a PhD, right? You're going to want to come over the top of them. So you're going to need to watch your mind. So if you can be in situations where you just ask people questions and don't try to teach them anything. Don't try to prove anything to them. Just ask them questions about their life. So what have you been doing in life? What's life been like? Where do you live? What do you do? What kinds of things have you done? Where do you work? Just ask them questions and with no need to share anything about yourself whatsoever. This can be really helpful for you because you can just listen to other people's life and just understand their life. Right? So you can also help others without any expectation of anything in return, because oftentimes the mind wants something back. Like if I'm going to help you to cut your grass, I want you to help me do it with mine too. Or if I help you pick up trash out of your yard, I want you to do it to me as well. But if you practice generosity, where you're just helping people out of the kindness of your heart without any expectation of anything in return, this is you just training your mind to be humble. You can, again, seek guidance from teachers, which is ultimately by itself helping the mind to eliminate ego. I can tell you that there are countless people in the world right now that don't even realize that they need a teacher to be able to get to enlightenment. There's people out there that think that they can do this by themselves. And this isn't actually true. That only a Buddha, which is very rare in the world, would be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. So just the action of choosing to have a teacher can humble the mind. Not that you're below the teacher. You should never consider yourself to be below the teacher. And if the teacher is wise, they would never consider themselves to be above you either. And you should see that in the politeness and the kindness and the respect in the relationship. But by having a teacher, it's going to put your mind in a situation where you're regularly learning from somebody without trying to teach that person anything, right? Sometimes people actually come to the temple, very rare, maybe once or twice a year, maybe 3 times at most, sometimes people come here and they try to teach me. They think that that's their role, is to come here and teach me. This is the ego, right? So when you enter into a learning environment, you would like to actually be a student and actually learn. And this is very humbling for the mind, that you're there to actively learn and understand. You would never be interested in giving someone unsolicited guidance. That's your ego. That's your conceit. Thinking, I know what's right. This person is doing something wrong, so to speak, and let me give that person advice and tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing in the world. You would only be interested in sharing advice and guidance when people ask you for it. As you're becoming more and more enlightened and you're becoming more and more wise, you're going to have wisdom about the world that other people don't have. And if you went around the world giving unsolicited advice to every single person who's doing something unwise, you will never accomplish anything in the world, because there's so many people doing things that are unwise based on the natural laws. So if you went around inserting yourself into people's lives and telling them every single thing that they should or shouldn't be doing, you're going to have endless conversations. And those people probably are going to be disinterested in hearing what you have to say, because your ego is coming at them, their ego is going to come at you, and now there's going to be this big conflict and this big problem. So if you went around sharing unsolicited guidance, you're going to just be spending hour upon hour upon hour talking to people that may not even be interested in what you have to say. Enlightened beings are very productive. They're very successful in life because they know how to use their time wisely. And an enlightened being is only going to share teachings with people who is requesting that information, who's requesting guidance. They're not going to give unsolicited guidance. So the Buddha, being very wise, he didn't walk down the street and just start teaching people just for the sake of teaching people. He waited for people to ask him questions, and then he would share with them. Because if you did it any other way, being as wise as an enlightened being would be, you'd be spending time with countless people, wasting your time. These people aren't even interested in what you have to say, but you're sharing information with them. So by you choosing to wait for somebody to ask you for guidance, now you're sharing with somebody who's truly interested in what you have to say. And now your words can actually be impactful and actually helpful to that person. So it's wise to wait for somebody to ask you for guidance rather than just going around giving unsolicited guidance to people. So seeking guidance from a teacher will help the mind admit to itself that you don't know everything about this world. Like I was mentioning earlier, if you have anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings, there are certain things about this world that you don't currently understand. And that's okay. You don't have to feel diminished by that. You don't have to feel like less of a person because of that. But just understand that there's certain wisdom about the world that you just don't have. And you're going to need to spend time with somebody who has that wisdom and seek that guidance. And that's what having a teacher is going to help you to be able to do. Whenever you notice this arrogance or pride or judging or measuring and comparing is coming up in the mind, cut that off and let it go. You learn this as part of the Eightfold Path that some of you guys learned earlier in this course, right? So whenever you notice with your mindfulness or awareness of mind that the mind's arrogant or judging or prideful or boastful, cut that off and let it go. Restrain the mind and take it in a different direction. And over time, this will gradually wear away. And then again, seeking guidance over multiple sessions with the teacher would be really helpful as well. These are some words of the Buddha where he talks about kind of how dreadful this ego is. This is titled, Gain, Honor, and Praise are an obstacle even for an arahant. An arahant is an enlightened being. This is someone who's completely purified their mind. So the Buddha says, monks, gain, honor, and praise, I say, are an obstacle even for a monk who is an arahant, one with taints destroyed, someone who's purified their mind fully. He's saying this gain, honor, and praise is an obstacle for them. When this was said, the Venerable Ananda, who's one of the Buddha's closest students, asked the master teacher Gautama, why, Venerable Sir, are gain, honor, and praise an obstacle, even for a monk with taints destroyed? Right? This is a very wise question. It's like, hold on a second. If someone's enlightened and their mind is completely purified, how is gain, honor, and praise an obstacle for them? Their life should be at ease. Everything should be completely peaceful for them. How is gain, honor, and praise an obstacle for an enlightened being? So the Buddha comes in and he says, I do not say, Ananda, that gain, honor, and praise are an obstacle to his unshakable liberation of mind. He's saying, I didn't say that once they're enlightened, that gain, honor, and praise is an obstacle for them. But I say they are an obstacle to his attainment of those peaceful dwellings in this very life, which are achieved by one who resides diligent, dedicated, and determined. So dreadful, Ananda, are gain, honor, and praise, so bitter, vile, obstructive to achieving the unsurpassed security from bondage, enlightenment. Therefore, Ananda, you should train yourselves thus. We will abandon the arisen gain, honor, and praise, and we will not let the arisen gain, honor, and praise persist, obsessing our mind. Thus should you train yourself. So he says, this gain, honor, and praise, this conceit that the mind takes on, it's an obstacle for you to obtain enlightenment. Because if you think you're so great, you think you're so wonderful, you think you're doing everything right and everybody else is so wrong, it's going to obstruct you from being able to see that you have some areas of improvement that are needed. So the Buddha is saying, once you're enlightened, gain, honor, and praise isn't affecting you. It's not an obstruction. It's on the process of getting to enlightenment. So where you see people sharing praise with you, where people are honoring you, where people are respecting you, you need to make sure it doesn't obsess your mind. Because when you're becoming enlightened, when you're walking this path to enlightenment, you're going to be becoming more and more wise. You're going to be becoming more and more loving and kind and compassionate. You're going to be speaking in ways that is very wise, and you're going to be able to have such harmonious relationships with people. And people are going to be complimenting you continuously. The more enlightened that you become, the more compliments you're going to get in your personal and professional life. And if you let your mind get obsessed by that, it's going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. So when people say, wow, you're so kind, you're so friendly, you're so loving, you might say thank you, right? Thank you for your kind words, but you don't let that obsess your mind. You're off to the next thing, right? When someone's like, wow, you're so friendly, you're so respectful, you might say thank you, but you don't let it obsess your mind. Because if you do, you getting all this positive feedback, all this praise, it's going to hinder you from getting to that peaceful and joyful mind, which is a permanent mental state. So if you get so excited and happy when someone's praising you, well, when somebody says something degrading and disparaging to you, you'll be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So when that gentleman came here and said that he thought that I was so conceited for sitting in a chair, it didn't affect my mind, because I know the reason why I'm sitting in the chair is because of my legs, right? I wasn't upset. I wasn't frustrated. I wasn't angry at him. I just said some loving words to him and said goodbye, right? So if you get so excited when people are complimenting you, because that's what you're going to get 99.9% of the time, when people are saying degrading and disparaging things, you're going to be upset by that. And an enlightened being, in 99.9% of the times, people are going to be saying loving and kind things about you. But there's going to be rare occasions where people are still going to be saying things degrading and disparaging. They're going to be gossiping and slandering about you. But if your mind is fully trained, you won't be affected by those things whatsoever. So just because you're enlightened doesn't mean everybody's going to do things your way. But because you're enlightened, you won't be affected when other people are choosing to make unwise decisions around you. So if someone's gossiping and slandering you in the unenlightened state, you might be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. But by the time you get to enlightenment, even when someone's gossiping and slandering, you can still maintain your joy. But if you allow this praise and honor and gain to obsess your mind, and you get so excited when someone's praising you, then that means that when you're not getting that, you'll be frustrated and agitated or annoyed. So the Buddha is wisely giving you a teaching here that says, don't let this obsess your mind, because it's going to hinder you from experiencing the peace and joy of enlightenment. So then, just to kind of finish this off, and I'll open up to any final questions you guys have, is what I teach people is always and forever develop your practice to eliminate the ego, and never assume that it has been extinguished, because your ego is going to be in your mind constantly trying to convince you that you're more enlightened than you really are, because the ego wants to stick around. The ego is kind of like a bad tenant. It wants to stay in this house. It doesn't want to leave. And every time you come around and ask for your rent, the tenant's like, oh, I'll get it to you. Just give me 3 more days. Give me 3 more days. My mom's in the hospital and I wasn't able to send you the check, right? And now you come back 3 days later. Oh, just give me like another week. That's all I need is another week. I lost my job the other day, but I've got this new job that's starting tomorrow. Just give me a little bit of time. Now you come back a week later. It's like, oh, my car needed this. If you could just let me stay for a little bit longer, I'll get you that money, right? So like your ego is kind of like this. It's going to try to convince you that you're wiser and more enlightened than you really are, so that it can stick around for longer and longer. And if you think game's over and your ego is gone, when it raises its head up, you're not going to notice it. If you remember that game, I don't know if you guys ever played this when you were growing up, that game Whack-A-Mole where the moles come up and you have like a hammer or a mallet and you kind of hit their heads when they go down, and they go down when you hit their heads. Well, if you're standing there and you think game's over, and then one of them pop their head up, you're going to miss it. You're not going to be able to hit it, right? So if you think game's over, ego's gone, completely gone, well, when it raises its head up, you're not going to notice it. So what I suggest you do is never convince yourself that the ego's gone, because that's the ego trying to convince you, right? So if I asked you, do you have ego? And if you said, no, I don't have ego, that's your ego speaking. Right? Your ego is trying to convince you that you don't have ego. So just don't ever assume that your ego is gone, and just always be working on it. Always be looking out for it. Whenever it's raising its head up, making you think that you're better than anyone else, knock it down and knock it down and knock it down. Or the other side, if you think that you're below people and you think of yourself as being inferior, don't allow your mind to do that either, right? You got to lift your mind up and realize that you're equal, just like everybody else. So not only do I suggest this with the ego, but the same thing with enlightenment. Because in this particular course, I've been teaching you about the 4 stages of enlightenment. Never convince yourself that you're enlightened. Because you're going to get to a point where it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You're not experiencing any anger, no frustration, no agitation or annoyance. You'll pretty much know that your mind is enlightened, but don't ever convince yourself of that. Just always and forever develop your wisdom, develop your understanding of the world, and just keep growing as a human being more and more and more and more. So if you convince yourself that you're enlightened, you're going to miss that ego. You're going to miss that unwholesome quality that's rising up in your mind. So just don't convince yourself that you're enlightened. Don't convince yourself that the ego's gone. Just stay vigilant and determined and dedicated to look for any unwholesome qualities in your mind and knock it down and knock it down and knock it down whenever it's coming in. So do you guys have any questions on anything that I've shared here? Yes, ma'am. For those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Thank you. My question centers around the contemporary application of the principle. So even though I'm aware of the necessity of dissolving the ego, but I live in a real society in which people always praise or sometimes they look down on me if I encounter someone who think they are superior than me. So, and also I feel like sometimes when I post something on Instagram, I always look forward to more likes. So
that's the ego. That's the craving.
Yeah. So, but that's real, and I think that applies to almost. So, how can I find a balance? Because I want to have a real sense of living in the world, and not like I'm getting better by receiving more praise. And also I want to eliminate my ego so that I can find ultimate peace.
Yeah, so in addition to these things, which are proactive things to be able to do to eliminate personal existence, fear, and conceit, you're going to need to do other things too. So like we were just talking about putting your mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. So if you know that when you post something on Instagram, you're constantly looking to see how many likes you have, and you know that's craving and that's coming from the ego, I would advise you to go an extended period of time without posting anything, right? Like go 3 months without posting, 6 months. refrain from that. Don't worry, you'll know what's going on in the world and you'll still have friends and all that kind of stuff. But you need to go an extended period of time without posting. And now this is going to train the mind to be restrained in that situation. So when you see your mind doing these kinds of things, you can do things to eliminate it. So if you're around someone who thinks of themselves as superior to you, it's important for you to think of yourself as being equal. And if possible, just go away from that person, right? Just to choose to walk away, because it doesn't make sense to spend time in that situation. If your mind's feeling angry or frustrated in that situation, that person is not causing that. It's your own mind that's causing it. But choosing to walk away is oftentimes the best thing to do to kind of protect your own mind, and then work on your craving, desire, attachment for everyone to see you as equal, because your mind's going to want everybody to see you as equal, where that's not going to be the case. You're going to be in some situations where people see themselves as being above you. Like here in Thailand, if you become an ordained practitioner, one of the first things they're going to teach you is that you're above everybody else. And that's not true. The Buddha never actually taught that. They will teach you not to why people, right? So there's a certain amount of ordained practitioners that maybe in their mind, they might think that they're above other people. And this isn't actually true. The Buddha taught that being an ordained practitioner is the lowest form of livelihood that you could ever take up. You can see it in his own words where he talks about this. But if I walked around, I'm not ordained, by the way, but if I walked around as an ordained practitioner and thought I was above everybody, then you'll see people who will why and show respect to an ordained practitioner, but an ordained practitioner won't why them back because they've been taught that they're above these people. And this is hindering them from being able to experience enlightenment as long as that's there. So in those situations, you might choose to why out of your practice, because you're not whying because you want something from this person. You're whying because of your practice is to be humble and respectful and polite in all situations. But when somebody else is choosing to be disrespectful, and maybe they're doing it overtly, not just choosing not to why, but overtly being disrespectful, then maybe you just choose to walk away, and that's the best situation. So if you're in a business environment or something like this, and someone's being arrogant and prideful and disrespectful and conceited, just choose to walk away in the meeting and choose to walk away, and then just associate with business partners, with coworkers, with people who aren't doing those kinds of things. And just because other people think that they're above you doesn't mean that you have to think that same way. So just remain humble and just see yourself as being equal, and then you'll see that this will promote more success both personally and professionally.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question on navigate something. So, for example, I have a friend, and she's a really good friend, and so on both sides, a lot of love and respect as friends. And I'm just curious in this particular situation. So when I send her an email or a text message, I usually send a long message, what's been happening, etc., and I put a lot of thought into it. And often when I get a message back, it's a very short message. It's like maybe a heart emoji or, oh, that's great, or something like that, really short. And so I'm trying to, as a result of everything, I'm trying to reframe it, because before I'd feel, I put all this effort into sending a message and she doesn't even, let me know what's happening in her, etc. So perhaps a good way of trying to reframe this. So maybe it's better just to send the message in a loving way, not expecting a huge message back. But then again, I think to myself, okay, if I reframe that in terms of, it's a lovely friendship, so it's worth having this friendship, obviously. So therefore, I want to send a nice message. And then I think to myself, okay, I will do this in the spirit of generosity. But isn't that feeding into the ego? But I'm not doing it from a sense of saying, hey, I'm great by sending this message. So I'm not in that conceitful way. I'm just trying to reframe this in my head.
Yeah, you need to get to the point where you don't have any expectation of anything in return, not even a message, not even a heart emoji. Because when you send a message to people, they're not going to always reply back to you. Right? Because that's impermanence. Sometimes you write a message and you don't get a reply back. So when you're writing a message, that's your choice to write a message. And if you're going to send it, should have no expectation of what they will or will not send you back. Because they might send you a long message, they might send you a short message, they might send you a heart emoji or whatever, or they might send you no message at all. And you need to train your mind to be completely comfortable and content in all of those scenarios, because you understand impermanence and you're not craving for it to be one way or the other. Okay. So I don't see any questions anywhere else. So I'm going to pause here. It's basically 12 o'clock. What I'm going to do is take a lunch break for you guys, take an hour and a half lunch break, where we'll get back at 1:30. And at 1:30, what I'm going to be teaching you guys is this next talk, where I'm going to be teaching you guys the animal to human, the evolution of our consciousness, and how the mind has evolved over multiple existences. We're going to start with meditation, but then I'm going to move into this talk, helping you to understand the 5 realms of existence, the cycle of rebirth, how people observe past lives, and all these kinds of things. So enjoy your lunch, whatever you do, and perhaps I'll see you guys at 1:30. So have a very wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Sawadee krap.